She was not poor, she was not simple, and she was definitely not powerless. But tonight, one wrong smile was about to cost a billionaire his empire. The chandelier light had not even settled when destiny sharpened its knife. Nobody in that room knew that the girl in the plain blue dress owned the ground beneath their feet, not the marble, not the gold, not the legacy, because Isabella Vale had learned very early that truth was invisible when wrapped in silence, and tonight she chose silence on purpose. The Gala Hall of Cross Dominion shimmered with arrogance, every laugh rehearsed, every handshake weighed in Prophet Sebastian. Cross stood at the center, a man who believed money was proof of worth, a CEO praised by magazines, feared by employees, worshipped by investors, and utterly blind to souls that did not glitter. Isabella arrived with nothing but a borrowed clutch and a calm heartbeat. Her hair tied simply, no diamonds, no designer label. Just a girl who smelled of old books and rain. She had met Sebastian 3 weeks earlier in a corner bookstore where dust floated like forgotten dreams. She had been shelving novels when he walked in, irritated, impatient, demanding a first edition without knowing its name. She had helped him, kindly smiling when he snapped, and when he asked what she did, she said, "I sell stories." He laughed, then intrigued by her quiet grace, he asked her to dinner and then to the gala, believing he had discovered a harmless novelty, a simple girl to decorate. His arm Isabella accepted, not because she needed him, but because she needed to see him. The real him away from the curated interviews and charitable lies tonight was not romance. It was reconnaissance. As they entered, whispers followed him and eyes slid over her with judgment, assessing, dismissing the blue dress, the flat shoes, the absence of sparkle. Sebastian felt it, and instead of shielding her, he leaned into it, his grip tightened. Not protective, but possessive, as if embarrassed. And when a board member smirked, Sebastian laughed louder, introducing her not by name, but as something temporary, something small, just a friend from a shop. The word shop landed like a slap. Isabella felt it, but did not flinch. She remembered her father teaching her that power grows quiet before it roars. The night unfolded with champagne speeches and silent cruelty comments, wrapped in silk questions like, "Where did you find her?" and "Is this charity work?" Sebastian never corrected them. Instead, he corrected her posture, her smile, her silence, until finally near the stage beneath the Cross Dominion banner, he did it publicly. He joked that she was lucky to be there, that some people should admire wealth, not touch it. Laughter erupted, cameras flashed, and Isabella Vale, the daughter of the man who owned Cross Dominion, the unseen majority shareholder, the woman whose signature could freeze markets, simply looked up at him and smiled, because the test was over and the lesson was about to begin. The applause faded, but the damage had already settled into the bones of the room. Isabella stood beside Sebastian as if nothing had happened, her face calm, almost gentle, while inside she was cataloging every glance, every laugh, every silent approval of cruelty. Because power always reveals itself in moments like these. Sebastian did not apologize. Instead, he leaned closer, whispering that she should not take things personally, that this was how his world worked. Isabella nodded softly, as if agreeing, but in her mind she was standing in another world, a glass office high above the city where her father once told her never to fight loud battles. When quiet ownership wins wars, she remembered being 15, signing her first holding agreement, learning how wealth hides in layers, trusts, shells, silence. Sebastian continued parading her like proof of conquest, introducing her again and again, diminishing her with casual humor, and each time she responded with grace, answering politely, thanking people who barely looked at her. Some women pitied her, some men dismissed her, all of them unaware that the Cross Dominion logo behind them was legally tied to her name. Through Meridian Vale Holdings, a company no journalist had ever connected to her face, the gala progressed toward its climax, a charity auction meant to display generosity. Sebastian bid aggressively on art pieces, boasting about values and dominance, and when Isabella leaned in to ask a simple question about provenance, he snapped, telling her she would not understand numbers like these. The auctioneer smiled awkwardly. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable, but nobody challenged him. Isabella stepped back, letting him shine, letting him dig deeper. 'Cause arrogance is loudest when it thinks it is safe near the balcony. An older man with silver hair watched her carefully. His name was Marcus Hale, the Cross Dominion legal director, a man who had signed papers with her years ago when she was introduced only as beneficiary V. He recognized her immediately. His breath caught his eyes widen, but she gave him a subtle shake of her head. Not yet. Marcus understood power dynamics better than anyone, and he waited. Sebastian soon grew bored of pretending and abandoned her Gala 2 network, leaving her alone near the exit, as if she were an accessory no longer needed. Isabella used the moment she wandered the hall, greeting staff, thanking servers, listening to security guards complain about unpaid overtime, noting names, schedules, cracks in the empire, because every kingdom falls from its weakest brick. Meanwhile, Sebastian boasted to investors, claiming Cross Dominion was untouchable, that markets bent to his will, that no shareholder could threaten his vision. Those words echoed through the room and reached Isabella like a challenge. She checked the time. Midnight approached, and with it, the deadline she had set for herself. She returned to the center as the host announced a surprise reveal. An anonymous benefactor had pledged a historic donation to the foundation. Murmurs rose. Sebastian smirked, assuming it was another feather in his cap. The lights dimmed, the screen ignited, and the Meridian Vale Holdings logo appeared, crisp, unmistakable. Marcus inhaled sharply. Sebastian frowned, confused. Isabella stepped forward at last, her voice calm, steady, cutting through the hall as she introduced herself properly. Isabella Vale, director of Meridian Vale Holdings, majority stakeholder in Cross Dominion Industries. The silence that followed was not empty. It was catastrophic. Faces, drained glasses, froze. Sebastian laughed reflexively, then stopped when Marcus confirmed it, when phones buzzed with instant verification, when the screen shifted to legal documents and ownership percentages. And in that moment, Isabella looked at Sebastian, not with anger, but clarity, and said, "This was never a date. This was an audit." The room did not explode with noise. It collapsed into silence, the kind that bends spines and rewrites. Future Sebastian felt his breath shorten, as if the air itself had been repossessed. His mind raced, searching for an exit, a misunderstanding, a joke, anything but the truth now glowing behind. Isabella on the massive screen, numbers, percentages, dates, signatures, all pointing to one undeniable reality: the simple girl he had mocked owned the power he worshipped. Investors stared at him, no longer allies but auditors. Board members avoided his eyes, calculating distance. Survival headlines were already being written in real time. Isabella remained, still letting the shock settle, because revelation without restraint becomes spectacle, and she wanted precision, not chaos. She continued, calmly explaining how Meridian Vale Holdings had quietly acquired controlling interest years earlier, how leadership was left untouched to observe culture, conduct, character. Tonight was not personal. She said it was procedural. Sebastian tried to interrupt, laughed nervously, claiming he had no idea who she was. Isabella met his eyes and replied, "That was the point. Ignorance is a choice, especially for men who believe the world exists to impress them." Security shifted subtly closer to her, now receiving silent instructions through discreet earpieces. Staff who once bowed to Sebastian now watched him with measured distance. Marcus stepped forward, formally announcing an emergency board session, effective immediately, citing reputational risk and ethical violations. Murmurs turned into movement. People left their seats, phones pressed to ears, alliances dissolved like sugar in rain. Sebastian finally spoke, anger cracking through fear, accusing Isabella of manipulation, of entrapment, of humiliation. She listened without flinching, then reminded him that respect does not require disclosure, and cruelty does not require permission. She listed incidents, reports, anonymous complaints, settlements, buried through legal pressure, each one verified, time-stamped, and approved under his authority. The Gala screens shifted, again displaying internal emails, audio transcripts, performance reviews altered to punish dissent. The audience gasped as the image of a visionary CEO fractured into a pattern of abuse. Isabella explained that wealth tests character by removing consequences, and tonight consequences had arrived, not through revenge, but governance. She announced immediate suspension pending investigation, effective now access. Revoked accounts frozen pending review. Sebastian stepped back as if struck reaching. For allies who no longer existed, guards approached politely, firmly guiding him away. Cameras captured the fall, not of a man, but of an illusion. Isabella turned to the audience, thanking them for attending, and reminded them that true power does not announce itself. It watches, listens, waits, and acts. Then she walked toward the exit, the same door she had been abandoned beside. Earlier staff straightened, clearing a path not because of fear, but recognition. Outside, the night air was cool. Isabella inhaled deeply, as if shedding a borrowed skin. The test was complete, but the lesson was not finished. Morning arrived like a reckoning. Headlines flooded screens, markets trembled, cross-dominion stock halted. Pending investigation, analysts scrambled to explain what insiders already knew: an empire built on silence had finally been heard. Sebastian Cross woke in a private residence, stripped of access, staring at notifications he could not open, lawyers he could not reach, a name now trending with words he never imagined attached to it. Isabella, meanwhile, sat in a quiet office overlooking the river, sunlight spilling across old bookshelves. She preferred these rooms to boardrooms because truth did not echo here. Her father stood beside her, proud. Not surprised he had trained her for this, not to conquer, but to correct emergency meetings. Unfolded across continents, Isabella chaired them with calm authority, outlining reforms, leadership restructuring, restitution programs, independent audits, and, most importantly, accountability. She emphasized that cruelty is not culture and profit. Without dignity is theft. Executives nodded, some in relief, some in fear, but all in understanding that the era had shifted. Employees received emails that morning, protections, established whistleblower lines, activated settlements, reopened voices. Once buried, now invited. The press attempted to frame Isabella as vengeful, as deceptive, but facts dismantled, narratives, interviews revealed. Meridian Vale Holdings, long history of ethical turnarounds. Companies revived, not stripped. Communities restored, not exploited. Isabella declined glamour. Choosing clarity, she explained that anonymity was not deceit, it was insulation, allowing truth to surface. Unfiltered reactions poured in from employees who had endured Sebastian praise for his fall, but for the change it unlocked. Sebastian attempted statements through representatives, blaming, misunderstanding, class difference, social traps. But no one listened because excuses sound hollow. When patterns are documented, legal proceedings began quietly. Effectively, shares redistributed, board reconstituted, and Cross Dominion reintroduced under interim leadership, selected for competence, not charm. Isabella visited the bookstore where it had begun returning to dust, and silence the owner greeted her. Unaware of the Gala, the scandal, the fall, Isabella smiled, shelving a novel for a moment, grounding herself in origins, because power that forgets where it started becomes dangerous. Messages arrived from women across industries, thanking her for showing that grace does not mean weakness, that quiet does not mean small. The Gala hall stood empty that night. Chandeliers, dim banners, removed the space where arrogance once echoed, now held only memory and consequence. And Isabella Vale, knowing the hardest part was not exposure, but rebuilding, prepared for the final step. The one that would decide whether justice was complete or merely symbolic. The final step was never about Sebastian Cross, because men like him are symptoms, not diseases. Isabella understood this as she stood before the reformed board weeks. Later, the room no longer glittered with ego, but steadiness. The silence now carried responsibility. Not fear. She opened the meeting not with accusations, but with vision, explaining that power must be trained like fire, controlled, or it consumes everything. She announced the permanent restructuring of Cross Dominion, dissolving old hierarchies, profit-driven quotas, and replacing them with transparent systems, employee representation, Ethical oversight and public accountability clauses, something unheard of in their industry. Gasps followed, but no objections because the data supported her every reform. Every projection showed growth, stability, trust. Returning markets responded. Slowly, then confidently, stock resumed climbing, not on hype, but belief. Sebastian Cross was sentenced not by headlines alone, but by consequence, stripped of titles. Barred from leadership, fined heavily, and forced into restitution programs funding. Worker protections, the same systems he once silenced. In a quiet courtroom he finally saw Isabella again, not on a screen, not on a stage, but across a table. He attempted an apology framed in regret, but she listened only long enough to respond, forgiveness is personal, justice is structural, and this was never about us. She left him there, diminished, not destroyed, because destruction teaches nothing. Outside the courthouse, employees waited not to cheer, but to witness closure. Isabella spoke briefly, reminding them that dignity is not a favor granted by wealth, it is a right protected by courage. She declined monuments, declined awards, declined myths. Instead, she invested into education foundations anonymous, again because the goal was never recognition. It was correction. Months later, the Gala Hall reopened, not for elites, but for community programs, scholarships, mentorship events, where janitors, interns, executives shared space. Equally, the blue dress from that night hung framed not as fashion, but as a reminder that simplicity can carry storms. Isabella returned once more to the bookstore, sitting quietly, turning pages. Living proof that the strongest people do not need to announce themselves, and somewhere a new CEO learned quickly that leadership begins with listening, ends with service, and survives only through humility. The world moved on, but something fundamental had shifted. Stories spread, not of revenge, but of recalibration. Young women repeated her name, not as idol, but example. In boardrooms everywhere, someone hesitated before mocking someone smaller. Quieter, simpler, because now they knew the richest person in the room is often the one saying nothing at all.